Fear rarely announces itself. It doesn't say, "I'm scared." It says things that sound reasonable. It says, "I just need more time. I don't want to rush this. I want to be sure. I don't want to make the wrong decisions." And because those thoughts sound calm, measured, and reasonable, you trust them. But I want you to think about this for a moment. How many times have you told yourself that you're being logical, only to look back later and realize that nothing actually moved forward? Not because you chose no, but because you never chose at all. That's what fear does. It doesn't stop you in a dramatic way. It stops you quietly by convincing you that waiting is wisdom. Today, we're going to stay inside that moment. The moment you hesitate, the moment you tell yourself that you're being smart, and the moment fear takes the wheel without you realizing. Welcome to the Inner Launch, where we talk about rebuilding your self-trust, reclaiming your identity, and creating your next chapter from the inside out. I'm your host, Christina Volkovich. In the last episode, we talked about why you don't trust yourself yet, and how second-guessing became a strategy for staying safe. Today, we're going to talk about one layer deeper. Because once self-trust is shaky, fear doesn't show up as panic. It shows up as logic. And if you don't know how to recognize that, it will quietly run your life. Fear is easiest to recognize when everything is falling apart. When you're showing up, being responsible, and handling things, fear adapts. Fear has to adapt. It can't afford to be loud, so it becomes subtle, responsible, and it becomes the voice that sounds like it's looking out for you. That's why so many people say, "I'm not afraid, I'm just being careful." And they genuinely believe it. Because fear doesn't feel emotional anymore. It feels like thoughtfulness. And once fear sounds thoughtful, you stop questioning it. So let's slow this down and discover what this looks like in real time. When you're about to make a decision, not a big decision, just one small, honest decision. Maybe it's sending that text, saying no, choosing yourself. For a brief moment, there's clarity. A quiet, internal yes, or a subtle no. And then, before you can act, your body reacts. Your chest may tighten just enough to make you pause. Your stomach may drop like you did something wrong. There's a flicker of discomfort that doesn't even feel like fear yet. And that's when your mind rushes in, not to ask what's true, but to explain why you shouldn't move yet. Thoughts start lining up fast. What if I regret this? What if it causes a problem? What if I'm overreacting? These thoughts feel grounded, logical, and protective. They're not neutral. They're trying to pull you back into familiarity, because familiarity feels safer than trust. Here's why this is so convincing. Fear isn't telling you to stop. It's telling you to wait. And waiting feels mature. Waiting feels like restraint. Waiting feels like you're being responsible with your life. But pay attention to this. Does waiting actually bring clarity? Or is it just delaying discomfort? Fear knows that if it can keep you waiting, it doesn't need to fight you outright. Because hesitation looks like wisdom, even when it's costing you momentum. One of the clearest ways to tell the difference between fear and truth is how it feels in your body. Fear feels urgent, tight, like pressure. It creates mental noise. You rehearse, replay, and scan for outcomes. Intuition, on the other hand, it's quiet. It doesn't argue. It doesn't need to convince you. It's steady, even when the choice is uncomfortable. Logic feels grounded and structured. It considers reality without catastrophizing. When your thoughts feel loud, racing, or in a loop, that's not clarity. That's fear trying to regain control. Because yes, it happens to everybody. A time that happened to me is in the story when I told you I decided that I wanted to travel the world. I started thinking how great it would be to travel the world, but every time I thought about all the little details about how I would do it and everything else on top of that, I started to get a headache. I started to get overwhelmed. I started to feel like, oh my gosh, maybe now's not the right time. And all the other feels. They felt logical because I told myself, I needed to figure things out first. But reality is, they were just stopping me. Years later, when I finally chose to go after my dream of traveling, I realized that I let fear control me. And if I just hadn't been afraid and hadn't listened to those fearful thoughts, I could have reached my goal, my dreams, so much quicker. But instead, I let fear paralyze me. Because overthinking feels protective because it gives you something to do without ever having to make the choice. It feels safer to analyze than it does to act, to prepare instead of to commit, and to think instead of to trust. But overthinking doesn't create clarity. It creates the illusion of control. And the longer you stay in that illusion, the harder it becomes. It becomes harder to hear yourself clearly, not because your voice is gone, but because it keeps getting overridden. When fear runs your logic, the cost isn't just time, it's self-trust. Every time you wait for certainty that doesn't come, you tell yourself that inner knowing isn't enough. And over time, something shifts. Life starts to feel smaller. Maybe you stop craving it as much. Maybe you're just going through the motions. Not because your dreams disappear, but because choosing them started to feel risky. You don't stop wanting. You stop trusting yourself for what you want. But here's a question that changes everything. Is this thought moving me into alignment towards my goal or away from discomfort? Logic may be cautious, but it still moves. Fear stalls. Instead of asking what is the safest choice, ask what choice helps me trust myself more. That question doesn't eliminate the fear, but it stops letting fear pretend that it's the truth. In the next episode, we're going to talk about what fear is actually protecting. Because when you stop letting fear run your logic, you don't just make different decisions. You start to become someone new. And that is one of the biggest identity shifts you can ever make. This is your reminder that you don't need to have it all figured out. Change doesn't come from rushing forward. It comes from paying attention. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'm inviting you to subscribe, send this to a friend who may need to hear it, and see how we can work together in the show notes. This has been another episode of The Inner Launch, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!